is all seated. Move on to item number 11, 2010-2011 Heritage Projects. Request to modify Predator Management Projects. Secretary Ken Mayer, action.
Mr. Chairman, Larry or Tony are going to give this presentation.
Go ahead.
For the record, Tony Wassley, Department of Wildlife. I've got 6 projects before me in the support material that can be found at the door. The projects include project number 1023, 1026, 1027, 1119, 1120, and 1126. There are 3 projects from each of 2 proponents. The direction I received was to cooperate with the proponents, trying to draft some language into these proposals to meet the requirements of the Heritage Program, which had a requirement to be fairly geographically specific, but also for us, the Department and Wildlife Services to maintain a certain amount of flexibility to be able to strike in strategically in areas that lent themselves to successful predator management projects. So what you'll see with these 3 proposals, these 6 proposals, is 3 big changes. One is the geographic specificity. There's maps included with these, although they didn't photocopy very well. There are multiple areas addressed as opposed to the single or a couple areas that were originally proposed. And then we also added a monitoring component. We took a certain percentage of the project funds, varied from 15 to 20% of the project funds to be used for monitoring. That monitoring could be pre-project monitoring, could be post-project monitoring, could be monitoring as conducted by Wildlife Services in advance of the project to determine whether they felt in their professional opinion that predator management was warranted or had merit in that particular area. I'd be willing to go through the projects individually if you desire, or entertain any questions specific to each of the projects.
First, I'd like to have public comment on this, and then we'll have the commission ask him any questions you'd like. Any public comment on this particular item? Do you have any specific speakers on this?
Let's see here. Anybody out there that changed their card on here that didn't put a number down that want to speak on it?
Darrell Harwell, Washoe County Advisory Board. At the time of our meeting, the support material was not available. We met Monday night. The support material came out Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. We make a recommendation that the board tables this until Washoe County and the public can have their input on these projects using the heritage money.
We had George Cormier.
George Corner speaking for myself on this one. I have spoken against a particular project. It's Mr. Laughlin's project on coyotes in Area 6. Now that everybody's sat down and come up with what I view as a workable proposal now, I still have a basic disagreement with Pat over philosophy. I still think this money is better spent for habitat restoration or improvement, but I'm going to drop my opposition to it. I believe it's workable now.
Thank you. Paul Dixon.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County. As with the heritage projects here, when this was brought up at my cabin, it's in the action report that went into you. The CAB in Clark County was disappointed that this was agendized and not properly noticed so the CABs could give comment on it. And Clark County felt that with the changes that were done to these proposals, they would have liked to have been able to tell you whether or not they felt that they were now in support or not in support of them, and give you that vote of confidence or non-confidence. And from a public perspective, and since we're spending sportsman's dollars, they really felt strongly that, and wanted me to tell you that these projects, if they were agendized in September and were given time to be run through the cabs, you might be surprised at the input that you get back since you've revised these proposals and put stuff in, and it might tend to make you believe that it isn't certain individuals or certain counties that are against what we're doing with Heritage. They were looking for more complete proposals and things that people could understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Candido Mendy, Velco CIB. We voted to support this unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further public comment period now closed. Bring it back to the commission. We had questions. Mr. Macbeth had a question?
Yes, actually this isn't a question for Tony. This is a question I'm going to direct to our council, Dag Stockton and Dag New. I'm concerned, and I like to address the point that you know, whether I agree with the amendments or not, they certainly are much better. And first of all, let me make a disclosure. When I read some of the details of this stuff, I actually saw the name K Valley Ranch and K Valley, and so I'm going to disclose right up front that my brother owns the K Valley Ranch, and I don't think it's necessary, but I'm disclosing anyway, just out of abundance of caution. But be that as may, one, isn't this a tacit admission, if not a direct admission, that the projects originally were not valid, were not complete at the time of the Heritage meetings where these were originally approved by this commission? And if that's the case, what is the procedure to basically go back and reapprove them or modify them? I don't see anything in the regulations or in the statute that deal with this issue. And there were other proponents of projects that were shut out of the process at the time these projects were approved in an inadequate manner, obviously, because now they're coming back to us modified. And so therefore, do we have an issue with respect to you know, our authority to even approve these projects? Do they have to go back out to bid? Do they have to go back out to bid and everybody have another chance? They go back into the pot and have to be redone. And so regardless of the merits of these projects as they're proposed right here, we're talking about approving Heritage projects. There's a time and place for it. There's a procedure and a regulation for it. I'm not seeing that we're following. And I think that council needs to address this.
Do we have anything on that, Mr. Stockton?
The standard for the projects when they come before the commission the first time is whether or not they're in substantial compliance with the regulations, with the statutes, not whether or not they're perfect at the time they come in here. And I do not believe that I don't know of any authority that would say the commission could not modify a project that proved to need changes. The question, and I know I'm hesitant to even say anything because this goes to the lawsuit that's been filed by Mr. Dixon, and I know this is anyway, is that the standard when they're approved the first time is substantial compliance. And if they're in substantial compliance, then it's within the board's authority to approve them. And if they prove to need changes later, the board is within its authority to make those changes. So that's all I have to say.
Any of the commissioners have questions, comments? Mr. Capurro, followed by Mr. Hall.
Thank you. There was a review done by Mr. Cates following this issue when they were first approved, and you reviewed the whole system of applications for Heritage money and issued what I took to be some
Mr.
guidelines.
Cooper, I don't think that's fairly within the scope of the agenda item, so
We could
need
change.
to probably move on from that.
But it answered the question that he has, and that is that
Well,
he found that we were in substantial compliance.
Mr. Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that not only the proponents of these projects, but NDOW has spent a lot of time on it. I think we've got it down to the point where it's as good as it's going to get. And with that said, if you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to make it.
Shortly, we got, we'll come back to you on that. We've got a couple comments from the commission here. Mr. Lent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Tony Wasley for diligently pursuing compromises with on these projects with the proponents of them. And I've heard nothing but good from the two proponents of them, where they got together, came to something. And I talked to Director Mayer, and there's some time intervals here, and that's why they came before the commission now. And maybe I'll have him address the time interval, why we have to, why these came before the commission at this time. And but these guys said there's a pleasure working with the department, and especially Tony Wasley, and I want to commend the department to getting together to do this. And I was told that they one of the projects, the one from Southern Nevada, was online the Tuesday before Washoe County's meeting. Did that get online? And then I'll have Director Mayer talk about the time frame here.
Both of the Hunters Alert projects, Project 1023 and Project 1126, were both sent out as support material for the Wildlife Damage Management Committee. So although they weren't sent out with commission meeting support material, they had been sent out on Friday afternoon. And then on Tuesday morning, they were sent out again along with the other 4 projects.
Okay, thank you. Director Mayer, could you go through that time frame that we're involved in?
Sure, be happy to. Ken Mayer, for the record, Director of the Nevada Department of Wildlife. There's a lot of moving parts with the commission and what we have to do with the budget shop and contracts and whatnot. And what we'd like to start with is, well, when do we need to get the work on the ground? And obviously, if we don't start in November, I think we've got a problem. So if you start with the November and you start backing up, when do you have to have it approved by this commission in order to get it on the BOE agenda in time to actually for us to write a contract with the project proponents? At the same time, the project proponents need to be dealing with Wildlife Services so that their contractual arrangement is put together. Our determination was that we could do it in September, but then that's pushing our staff to the max to try to get all the other paperwork in place in order to make the BOE agenda for the November meeting. So that's why we've brought it up here at this particular meeting to get your approval, because we had to get your approval to modify the projects before we could then schedule it, getting to DAG-NU and on the BOE agenda.
Very good. And I would personally like to thank Mr. Wasley, Mr. Gilbertson, Haskins, Mr. Mayer, as well as the project proponents, Hunters Alert, and Nevada Alliance for Wildlife, for working together as diligently as they have, and to get these together in a timely fashion. I know it was a crunch time-wise to get something to happen. Appreciate that very much. And is there any further questions, comments from this? Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask the department, are they 100% behind these now?
Commissioner Wallace, yes, the commitment that we made and we've made from the very beginning, I'm glad you brought this up. A lot of the struggles that we've had between what the commission wanted and what we thought was applicable from a biological perspective, we have a professional responsibility from this end. And what we did here is we finally worked together to something that we could swallow from a biological perspective and work together for a project we all feel that has a chance to be successful. And we also added in the monitoring component, because the bottom line is to do these things without learning something along the way, you don't know how to make it better, number one. And number two, if you don't have that monitoring information, somebody challenges you, how do you defend your actions? And as a director, I want to make sure whatever we're doing, we're spending the money wisely, we're doing good science along the way, and then when it's done, we can look past the red face test. And people say, well, you did X, Y, and Z. The other thing is that if we do a prescription and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean, and we say, hey, that didn't work, that doesn't mean we're against predator management. It just means that we're not going to support that action. We're going to find another way to do it. And if we can find the prescription that works in a bunch of different places in the state of Nevada, we're going to be far better off. So, yeah, at this point, I think we're comfortable with the way Tony has put this together, and then, of course, working with Pat and with Cecil, that we are supporting these projects, and that's why we're here today.
Can I add a little bit on that? Tony Wasley, for the record. Some of the changes that were implemented, the two key changes, as Director Mayer indicated, the monitoring component, critical for the reasons he mentioned, but the flexibility that we have in these projects now. For example, historically, some of the areas identified in these proposals have been 014, where we have Project 18 that's ongoing. In the event that I believe occurred last year, Wildlife Services didn't need to augment their budget. However, 014 was identified in here. So instead of having a single area identified, there's multiple areas identified, and that allows us to be able to react. 015, for example, was identified in 1023 originally. Well, it's an interstate migratory herd, and if it's the only area identified and there's not sufficient snowfall in California to get the animals to migrate in, then any control activity in 015 probably isn't going to be fruitful. So by increasing the flexibility of where we can go and the tools that we can use, the department feels much better about the potential for success with these projects.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else on the commission? Question? Comments? Motions? Mr. Howell.
I move to approve 2010 and 2011 heritage projects as requested by the department to modify 1023, 1026, 1027, 1119, 1120, and I'm missing one.
1126.
1126. Yeah, I have it.
I second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to accept the heritage projects 1023, 1026, 1027. That's the 2010 and 2011 projects 1119, 1120, and 1126 as presented. Is there any further discussion by this commission? Mr. McBeth, go ahead, please.
Yes, just for the record, I'm going to be abstaining. I abstained last, I believe it was May, with regard to the 2011 projects, 1119 and 1120, based on the fact that they didn't meet the requirements of the statute and the regulations at that time. I'm still uncomfortable with that issue. The explanation given, I'm sorry, doesn't get me there. And so rather than, change the way I voted at that time, I will be abstaining, and I'm going to extend that abstention to the other projects for the 2010 year, 1023, 1026, 1027, on the same basis.
Thank you. Anybody else in the commission on this item?
Question.
Question. Mr. Vogel has a question.
No.
No.
Call for the question.
He calls for the question. Okay. question requires a 2/3 majority vote, doesn't it? Isn't that, don't we have to vote on the question?
Just a majority vote.
Just majority.
Majority vote.
Just,
Doesn't the question, anything that limits
2/3.
debate?
Is there a motion to cut off debate?
No, that
that's
was
just
the question, move to the question.
I just,
Previous
I
question.
call for the question.
Call for the question
Call
means
for the vote.
immediate vote.
Let's
as
vote
opposed
on
to stop talking about it.
Yep.
Oh, okay, all right, so it's a motion to call for the
It's
question.
a motion to call for the question.
do
And I think that requires a 2/3. Non-debatable, not anything, it's, I think it requires 2/3 vote.
Didn't get seconded.
Yeah, it did. It was moved and seconded. You seconded it.
But
not to call for the question.
Call for the question.
Just withdraw that.
I withdraw it.
Okay.
Robert's Rules of Order.
Just withdraw it.
Okay. Everybody clear on the motion, which is to approve these projects? Seeing no further questions, proceed to vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
And I'll abstain for the record.
You get that, Suzanne? Motion passes. All right, let's move on to number 12.